Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about math. I know that is pretty much one of the worst things that I can entertain you talking about, but unfortunately, something pretty crazy is kind of happening, and it's becoming more and more of a discussion. I made a few videos kind of similar to this one talking about how, the education system has been getting, reformed over the last few years a lot. I know there's a lot of debate about a lot of these things that are being done, including critical race theory, but this I don't think is specifically critical race theory, if I'm correct, but it's kind of trending in that way a little bit. It's a little borderline with that, but essentially this article is arguing that the way math is being taught right now is racist. And it's talking about some of the changes that are being made to supposedly address the racism in math. Now, I do want to go ahead and say I don't really understand how math is racist. I mean, if you're teaching math straight up, then there's no real way to racially influence it the way I see, because math is kind of just like a universal law, you know what I mean? It's more or less something that we've kind of discovered because it works so well with everything that we know. I mean, math is obviously extremely fundamental to the entirety of the universe. Everything is made up of math in some way. I mean, like the microphone in front of me, it has size dimensions, it has a specific weight. There's a certain number of atoms that are taken up to make this, and there's, like the monitor in front of me, there's a certain amount of pixels on the screen that gives a certain resolution, and there's math in pretty much everything. I mean, all shapes and everything that we see virtually is just math that's being disguised really well by whatever we see. So I don't really understand where this argument even comes from, because it's not like math is racist, right? If math was racist, I feel like we would notice a lot more that a universal concept is just somehow discovered that it wants to target one specific race of people, or even just people on Earth. Obviously, we're just a drop in the bucket compared to everything else, so it just seems really weird, and I don't understand a lot of it, but we're gonna go ahead and go through this and talk about it. So the article we're reading today is called "Is Math Education Racist? Debate Rages Over Changes to How US Teaches the Subject." Funny thing, actually, before we get into this, I want to go ahead and say that this was sent to me last night on Twitter by someone actually multiple people have sent me this now. I've gotten 3 or 4 different tweets about this whole thing here, and it was an article from the USA Today, and they wrote this, and initially, when I first opened it, it was free, right? You could just open it up. The article had no paywall, but I noticed that after it got 2,000 or so quote retweets, and it got a whole bunch of comments, pretty much just people globally just destroying this article, they actually managed to put it behind a paywall. So basically what happened is, people were destroying this article, and they then put it behind, their membership on their website or whatever. You gotta pay, $5 a month or something to basically read this article, and obviously I'm not doing that, so I actually found a different copy of it on yahoo.com. So, yeah, got around that paywall, USA Today. Thanks for trying that one on me. Didn't work. So, but bolder recommendations to make math more inclusive are blowing up out of the world of mathematics education. Schools are collapsing math tracks to put kids of all abilities in the same classes and adding data science courses that carry the same prestige as calculus, long seen as a gateway to a career in STEM fields and elite colleges. Another heated issue, the extent to which math education should include real-world problems involving racial and social inequities. Fairly or not, that debate has landed in the murky soup of critical race theory digressions. The changes have pitted mathematicians and math educators against each other and sparked criticism from affluent parents upset by the elimination of gifted tracks. They've caused upheaval in one state, California, as professors, parents, and teachers spar over proposed changes to the state's K-12 math framework. Quote, "We're not changing or lowering the standards, we are outlining how inequitable the teaching of math is right now," said Joe Bowler, a Stanford University math education professor at the forefront of the changes. Alright, so there's a lot I want to talk about right here. First and foremost, they're collapsing all of these different math classes, essentially boiling them down into one math class. So they're taking away the gifted programs in schools that are following along with this, and they're putting students who aren't achieving as well into the same classrooms as kids who are overachieving even. And there's a couple reasons why I don't see this as a good idea, okay? Now, I've unfortunately been on both ends of the spectrum. When I was really early on in school, I actually was really good at school. I was so good at my classwork and stuff, I was recommended to skip almost 3 years of school early in elementary school. When I was in kindergarten, they wanted to send me directly to the 2nd grade. In 1st grade, they wanted to send me directly to the 3rd grade. Now, my mom actually turned this down both times. She did not want me to just, advance to these classes like that, because she was afraid that given the fact these kids would be multiple years older than me, that it could have stunted my emotional and social development a lot. And obviously, you know, I can see that concern, but I honestly would have liked to have graduated high school when I was like 15 or 16. That would have been nice. But, you know, I went through school the normal way. And then as I got later on into school, I became a worse student to the point where I even was getting way worse grades. I wasn't getting straight A's anymore. And that's simply because I didn't like school, okay? I mean, first couple years it was fine, but after that, I just wasn't interested in it. I had other things, including YouTube, that I was more interested in doing. Obviously, that worked out for me, but, you know, not every kid gets that situation. There's a lot of kids who are stuck on both ends. They're either, you know, overachievers or they're underachievers in the classroom. And both are honestly fine, but you can't teach kids with that big of a gap the same way. You know what I mean? There's multiple reasons for why a kid could underachieve in school. Maybe they simply don't understand their classwork. Maybe there's problems going on at home that realistically the kid can't address. I mean, the parents are arguing, you know, they're going through a tough time being abused or something at home. The kid can't do anything about that. Or maybe they are, you know, being bullied at school or something and their focus isn't in class. There's a lot of different reasons for why that could be, but at the end of the day, that kid still should not be taught the same way that a kid who is overachieving in the class is. A kid who's overachieving in the class, while yeah, they could, I guess, set an example for their fellow classmates, they're not the answer to the problem. And another reason that I'm not a big fan of pushing all these classes together is all it does is it puts extra stress on the teacher. For instance, let's say you're a teacher at a school, right? And you have you got like 10 kids in the difference of the classes. So let's say if they were to merge the classes together, your workload goes from having 18 students to 28 students. That's obviously a pretty drastic change. And it's pretty obvious that a teacher that has more work to do, more students to interact with, is probably not going to teach as effectively as they would if the workload was definitely cut down a little bit. The only problem is when you do that, you do have to hire another teacher to teach the advanced class, or, you know, the class falling behind. But at the end of the day, I think that's a much more effective way to teach kids because, number one, they get more one-on-one time with the teacher. So when your class only has 18 kids compared to 28, obviously, you're going to get more time with the teacher when you need it because the teacher doesn't have to handle all these kids. The teacher going around to 28 kids individually trying to help them with their work is going to be a lot harder and a lot more time consuming than just working with like 18. So if you have a teacher that can handle 18 kids who are struggling, I would say that's a much more effective way right off the jump to teach these kids and help them get caught up than to just shovel a bunch of kids who are smart into the class, stunt their development potentially by holding them back with a class basically that can't keep up with the amount of work that they need to be doing. It realistically just seems to harm all the kids overall. Now, this article goes on to claim that this apparently has quote-unquote promising effects. It doesn't really link anything, which is my problem with this article. There's no evidence, okay? They're just saying, hey, it's working. The only things that it really links are like some surveys about like pretty much that adults are answering, right? It's about workers and things like that. It's not about students. Making math more relevant by using real-life problems around social inequities has struck a nerve as Republicans accuse teachers of overemphasizing race and racism in subjects such as American history. Many GOP-led states have passed laws aimed at curtailing such discussions. Proponents of the framework changes in California, on the other hand, have encouraged working equity discussions into math class. Honestly, I also don't really agree with this change either. First and foremost, you know, they're arguing that kids aren't learning enough in math, right? They're making it about, you know, kids who are of, you know, low-income families and people of color, they're not performing well enough in math, especially early on in these classes, and it's leading to, you know, divides in what types of jobs that they'd be interested down the road in. I'm pretty certain that if you start introducing shit that should be taught in history class into math, that's simply only going to complicate things. It only provides a reason for people to argue. It only provides a reason for people to get divided away from the issue at hand. The issue at hand is that kids aren't doing good in math. That is a problem that needs to be addressed, but it doesn't need to be addressed in these, you know, jerk of the motion type of efforts where they're just throwing something at the problem and hoping that it sticks. I'm not one of these people who's like doesn't want anything about racism to be talked about, right? There is a place and a time for that. Like, yeah, talk about the things that were racist and talk about the racist part of American history in history class. Kids should learn about the civil rights movement and everything that happened in that. And they should learn about slavery and how horribly slaves were treated. And they should teach about things like Black Wall Street and Emmett Till and all these other people. And it shouldn't only be limited to just like, you know, African American history. I think it's also important that pretty much the entire history of America gets told. Because oftentimes, yes, I think we do as a society forget that there is a lot of history that kind of does get brushed over simply because, you know, it happened to a minority community or something like that. That does happen. I will agree on that, but math is not the place to teach that. It's essentially like saying, oh, well, you know, kids aren't doing good enough in science, so let's start throwing some music theory in there. That'll get the kids interested in learning about it. I think maybe kids would be more interested in learning math and they would show more promising results in math if the student-to-teacher ratio got lowered across the board in schools, if teachers actually could spend one-on-one time with students, if there was genuine incentives to make kids want to learn. I mean, that's, I think, a huge problem in these, like, American schools especially, man. Like, when I went to school, a huge problem is, like, with homework, dude. That is not an incentive. Getting straight A's is not enough of an incentive to get kids to just want to naturally learn things. Schools need to find a way to actually engage with students on a real level and stop trying to treat them all as if they're the same. Nobody learns the same as everyone else. Everyone has a different way of learning. Everybody has their own personal experiences, and acting as if like you can just take a bunch of all these different kids from all these different environments and backgrounds, throw them in the same room and teach them the same thing without, you know, connecting with them on a personal level, you're never going to get kids to learn. Like, you hear people complain all the time that, like, schools with higher student-to-teacher ratios, you know, oh my god, like, why can't they get their test scores up? Why aren't kids here engaged in learning? Because there's no incentive and they have no one to actually help them. There's a teacher watching 33 students try to learn the exact same math with all their different capabilities in math. America is one of the only countries I can think of off the top of my head that spends, honestly, a lot of money on education. I mean, you know, a lot of students here in the US, they get tens of thousands of dollars every year spent on them in the public school system, but yet we rank, you know, fucking what, like 42nd in math. You know, the reading literacy rate for children is a lot lower than it should be. Our overall education rates are behind. America is a less educated country than other countries on the planet, when this is supposed to be the greatest country on the planet. And I think a lot of it comes down to the way that we teach kids, because the American school system is pile a fuck ton of homework on their back, hope they can understand what they're learning through the book, maybe ask the teacher 1 or 2 questions when you get to class tomorrow because the rest of the class is just busy time, basically. And, you know, if you're falling behind, maybe get tutored. Maybe get tutored or just be left fucking behind by the education system. And instead of actually addressing that issue and getting kids engaged and finding things that actually help kids learn, we've gotten to this point where we're debating putting history lessons in math and pushing everyone into the same math classes because there's a disproportionate amount of white and Asian kids in these gifted classes. It's essentially like saying that kids of color who aren't Asian can't make it into these gifted classes, which I think is a very racist fucking opinion to have in the first place. Cause like when I remember going to high school and everything, I mean, a lot of the kids who were in the advanced classes and the gifted classes were people of color. Like, I was in a lot of like advanced classes later on in high school. They were college courses. And there was definitely more people of color than this tries to make it out to be. You know, it wasn't just a bunch of white and Asian kids. No, that wasn't the case at all. There were Hispanic kids, white kids, Asian kids, black kids, all in the same classes, and they were all advanced. So this idea that, like, you know, just dumbing everything down essentially is what I agree with that. I think it is dumbing it down. I don't see how it helps, man. And I feel like instead of sitting around arguing about whether or not math is racist and whether or not we need to be involving more history lessons in it, I think that this is more time that we're wasting not addressing the real issues of these classes. With that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, not thinking math is racist, and signing out.